Hello, my name is Alan Wallace, and this is chapter 26. Friday afternoon, my mother was released from jail, and my dad went to get her. Sheriff Ben indicated we should keep looking for a murderer and figure it out pronto. I was back on the case, and just in time since I was still working it. The district attorney didn't want to try to prosecute on the evidence he had one hair being at the scene when she was there the day before didn't concern him, or the earring, and he believed my mother's story about why she had gone to see Norma. He seemed to dismiss the fact that blackmail often led to murder. Maybe he didn't read as many mystery novels as I did. He dismissed the killing for health paper for what Mom had said it was, random wishful thoughts put on paper. He accepted Sylvia's statement and Mom's similar statement in her interview with the sheriff. He had a very solid reputation. She had a very solid reputation in our community, and based on that, they let her go. It wasn't like she was going to run away. Also on Friday, Jimmy Joe Blanks was released by the judge. He swore in court that he would stay away from me, but was given a restraining order anyway. If he violated it, he would go back to jail. I wonder if that would stop him. Friday morning, I ran. I was finding running infinitely more satisfying than drinking. Afterward, even though it was Saturday, I called Lil and asked to visit with her. She moaned and groaned and finally said that she was coming to Terlingua anyway and would meet me in the office. I hated to get dressed in my uniform on the weekend, but I didn't think shorts would present the professional or intimidating image I hoped to project. I intended to force some truth out of that little woman. After cleaning my house, I went to meet Lil. She kept me waiting, of course. I entertained myself by staring at Cactus Hill and trying to imagine naked men running around out there. I heard the door open, but didn't rush to meet her. Is anybody here? Have a seat. I'll be right there. Soon as these other guys put their clothes back on. Hello, Lil. I shook her cold, limp hand and then sat as tall as I could at Barney's desk. It'd be great to be as large and intimidating as him. I have plans, you know, she said, snooty as ever. So do I. And we'll get right to the point. When I saw you recently at your house, you said that you and Norma were still close and were phoning and emailing each other. That's right. She looked me right in the eye and lied to me. I don't know what that I don't know why that was a surprise. That's not true. I recently checked Norma's phone bills, and the last call she made to you was about 6 months after the mediation of the lawsuit. The same is true for emails. You haven't heard from Norma in months. Lil hesitated a long time. I suppose it has been a while, she finally admitted. Why were you lying to me? I don't like you, and I don't like it that you're so nosy about my personal business. It's none of your concern who I talk to and when. I sat back in the chair and gave her the Barney frown. I'm glad to conduct a murder investigation. Lil, personally, I don't care what you do or to whom, but, and because you hate me, you want to pin it on me. That's unfair and you're wrong. I sincerely hope you had nothing to do with the murder of Norma Bates. Then what is your problem? My problem is when I ask people simple questions and they lie, I get suspicious. If you're innocent, then please give me the straight answers. Otherwise, you're wasting my time and I'm wasting yours. I'll keep bothering you until I feel satisfied. But what does my friendship with Norma have to do with her murder? For one thing, I have to eliminate you as a suspect. For another, it seems like you'd want to help to find her murderer if you were her best friend, as you say. I do want to. I do want. I want you to find whoever did it. Once again, I ask you if you were still friends after the Doctores Fronterizos crisis ended. Yes, at first. Then Norma decided the whole thing was my fault, and she got ugly about it. She said I was stupid to have ever trusted Stephanie in the first place, just because she was my friend. How was I supposed to know she'd steal? Lil, do you really believe my mother did all that thieving and mismanaging of the organization she started and still loves? Well, Norma said, I know what Norma said. I want to know what you think. I thought it was true at first, and it really hurt me. But later I saw the proof that Stephanie didn't steal, and I got confused. I asked Norma, and she said it wasn't really proof, just trumped up facts and more lying on Stephanie's part. It's hard to argue with that kind of logic. I see. So back to my original question. Your friendship with Norma had cooled off by the time she was murdered? Yes. I took a deep breath. Let's talk about trying to buy the murder of my mother. Lil couldn't have looked any more shocked if I had stood up and done a slow bump and grind out of my uniform. What are you talking about? I'm talking about 5 emails I have in which Norma was corresponding with you about hiring a man to kill my mother when she wouldn't move out of your way. I didn't know anything about that. I have proof you knew all about it, Lil. Okay, look. There was a time when Norma was so upset she did talk to a man about getting rid of Stephanie. You spoke with him too. Yes, I went with her, but I didn't even know his name, and we dropped the idea. We're not murderers. What did he look like? I don't know. It was dark and I couldn't see him. Lil, he was short, dark, and Mexican. He came across the river to meet us. He hardly spoke any English. He wore a ball cap pulled low and had shifty eyes. That tells me nothing. I'm sorry, but there was nothing remarkable about him. You don't even remember a first name? No, I have no idea. I guess that's all for now then. You little liar. If you want my opinion, I still think your mother is the most likely suspect, and I guess the sheriff thinks so too, because he took her to jail, didn't he? Yes, he did. I don't think she's the person we're looking for, though. Well, of course you wouldn't. You're her daughter. Lil stood preparing to leave. That reminds me of one more thing I said. What is it? You were aware that Norma, were you aware that Norma was blackmailing my mom? Lil sat down hard. She blinked at me. I could tell she hadn't known about it. You're making that up. No, it's true. How would she be blackmailing her? What could Norma have had on your mother? Maybe she found solid proof about her stealing. Don't go there, Lil. It wasn't about that. Had she had an affair with Stanner? Of course not. Quit speculating because you won't figure it out. I'm not going to tell you. What? Well, whatever. But there's your proof, Margarita. Stephanie killed Norma to shut her up. Doesn't that make sense to you? Surely you must know that already. Things are not always so cut and dried, Lil. She stood and looked down her nose at me. You just don't want her to be guilty because she's your mother. That's the truth. Her mouth gaped again, but she left without saying anything more. Since I had on my uniform anyway, I decided to speak with Roger Lockie about the dogs. It was a loose end, and I wanted to eliminate as many people as I could and see who was left. Lockie jerked his door open and glared. At that moment, I hoped he was the one that stabbed Norma. You got a thing for me or what? I nearly choked myself trying not to laugh. No, sir, I'm here about the murder. I suppose you want to come in. He turned and headed into his house, leaving the door standing open. I wondered if he had been drinking. He waved his hand at the same chair I'd occupied previously, and I sat. When I was there before, you said you'd gone to see Norma about her dogs. That's right. When Barney came to the scene immediately after your call, the dogs were not running loose. No, they weren't. I couldn't believe it. I'd heard dogs in my yard while I was making coffee, and had just assumed that it was those sons of bitches, because usually it was. But when I got to Norma's, I saw that her dogs had been put away. I didn't know if she had just put them up or if it hadn't been her dogs in my yard. I was going to ask her, but she wasn't talking, and you know why. I see. You still working with that big old lug? Yes, sir. You never get intimidated by him? Well, no. He treats me well. Of course you would, you being so pretty. I stood. Well, Mr. Lockie, thank you for your time. You be careful around that big lug. Come back anytime. On the way home, I tried to punch a hole in his story, but I thought it was true. He was a strange, grumpy old man. But that didn't make him a murderer. The loose end wasn't tied as neatly as I would have liked, but it would have to do for now. I turned my attention to Chapo Rodriguez. There was a local band playing at the patio at La Kiva. My heart thundered as I went down the steps, dressed up for the first time since Kevin's funeral. It felt good, but I was nervous as a teenager on a first date, and I didn't have a date, or want one. I was wearing a long, straight denim western skirt and a purple kringle cotton blouse worn low on the shoulder, and leather sandals. I'd taken great pains with my hair, although it was short and I didn't have a lot of options. When I came up to the bar, Phil stopped speaking in mid-sentence and mouthed, "Wow," at me. I smiled at him and slipped onto a stool. I didn't see Chapo anywhere, but the bar was packed. I hadn't looked around much as I entered because people were staring at me. Phil came and stood in front of me. He seemed confused about what to do. "I'd like a Coke, please, with a slice of lime," I said. "I saw you running the other day." My head went instantly to my father and what he'd said about the shorts. I felt panicky. Phil set the drink in front of me. "I take it running is working for you. I love it. You look Beautiful, Margarita. You stop a man's heart. Thank you, Phil. He looked good himself in tan cargo shorts and a Hawaiian print shirt open nearly to his waist. I tried not to notice what a muscled chest he had. Years of rowing, still rowing, big muscular arms. Row, row, row your boat. Will you dance with me when I get a break? Okay. He had to move on to serve other customers, but I thought he looked surprised. I never agreed to dance before and wondered if I was making a mistake. Now that I was here, I questioned how I would overhear anything from Chapo without getting close to him. That was out of the question. Even if I did get close, he wouldn't likely blab everything. It wasn't like he didn't know I was a deputy. A high school friend came up next to me and put his hand on my arm. Hi, Margarita. Hi, Eric. What a coincidence. Just a few hours ago, you were running around naked on Cactus Hill. Want to dance? The band is great. Not right now. I remember that you are a really good dancer. I wasn't sure of what to say. I hadn't needed to make small talk with a man in too long. I'd never been good at it, and a year of hiding hadn't helped hone my social skills. Eventually, he went off to hit on more accommodating women. There were plenty of them. Several other locals came up to speak with me, and then Phil was standing beside me, holding out his hand. Shall we? I took his hand like it was a dangerous thing. Most likely it was. Once my hand was in his, it felt okay. Nice, even. We waved our way through people standing around, and then Phil slid open the patio door and held it for me. The music was louder, and I remember suddenly how much I loved to dance. The band was a group of gringos, but they played Mexican music as well as most Mexican bands I'd heard. Phil and I joined the crowd twirling around the dance floor. Dancing felt good, and I tried to forget everything except the music, the breeze, and the brilliant stars. There was a sweet sense of flowering vine that covered a fence on one side of the patio. And there was Phil, who smelled faintly of Axe cologne and something nice but indefinable. I couldn't think about bulls or husbands who'd left never to come home, rape or murder. It all seemed to fade with dancing and the beauty of the night. When the pace slowed, Phil pulled me closer. I wish I wasn't working. I'd like to spend the whole rest of the evening dancing with you. This is nice. You seem like you're doing a lot better. I have to keep going, Phil. Running is helping, and I thank you for suggesting it. It's taking me places I haven't been literally and figuratively. Someone tried to cut in. I only have a 15-minute break, Phil said. I'm not going to give her up. The guy backed away as if Phil had pulled a gun. I haven't seen you in a skirt in a long time, Margarita. I seldom wear them. Well, you should. When the band started into a waltz, he said, "Want you to stand on my feet?" I laughed. I wouldn't do that to you now. I wouldn't mind. I came here to spy on someone, but I don't think that's going to work the way that I thought. I came here to spy on someone. I was hoping you'd come here to dance with me. That too. Does your spying have anything to do with the murder? I honestly don't know. I only suspect it. Maybe it's frustrating to work hard at something and still have zip. Yes, he said softly. I know how that feels. Dancing isn't zip, Phil. I hoped I hadn't misunderstood him. I have to take it slowly. Dancing is something I couldn't have done a week ago. I don't mean anything. You're right that dancing is a big first step. I was going to say this was probably never going to go where he hoped, but I remembered enough about dating not to cut a man off at the knees, especially if he had nice legs. And I was right up against his chest, which made me feel kind of weak and fluttery. It was erotic to be so close to a man, and irritating to feel it so intensely. The band was back to Mexican polka, but we were still slow dancing. Phil brought my hand up against his chest and held it there. His fingers smelled like the limes that he constantly sliced. I tried to be in the moment instead of a step ahead, or worse, looking back at other moments. I was enjoying myself, and because I didn't want, I was enjoying myself, and it surprised the hell out of me. I was sorry that Phil had to return to the bar, back in the water. But if I moved too fast, I was sure I'd drown. Just when I thought I wouldn't dance with anyone else, a man touched me on the shoulder. I turned to see my father. He was dressed so sharply, I nearly did a double take. He was even wearing what looked like a new Stetson. Women were watching him. He beamed at me and swept me onto the dance floor without asking. I'd been dancing with him since my first memories. Sometimes he and my mother and I would dance together, with me held between them. How would a kid feel safer that way? In a way, they were still holding me between them, and I was still safe. Aren't you going to dance with some of these single women giving the eye? I asked after we'd been dancing a while. Sure, but I always dance with the most beautiful woman in the room first, if she'll let me. That's how I met your mom. And you didn't learn a lesson from that? He laughed. I leaned my head against his chest. I love you, Poppy. He squeezed me tightly. I could barely breathe. It was good to see you out, Mija. It's good to be out. Be careful of Phil. Why? He was a river guide. I laughed at that. Don't you think he might have changed in 15 years? He's still a man. Are you saying not to trust men? No, I can't say that. A father just worries about his daughter, that's all. I'm sure you'll do the right thing. Later, we walked to the bar together. We'll have two of whatever Margarita is drinking, he said to Phil. You're very trusting, I said. I can tell by looking at you that you've given it up. That's all he ever said on the subject. After a while, a woman came and asked my father to dance, and he went off with her. Another man touched my shoulder. I turned to stare into the face of Chapo. Let's dance, he ordered. I saw you dancing. That was my father. I know that. I know your father. I don't want to dance except with him. And Phil, I was watching you dance with Phil. Chapo was not a man you want watching you, and I didn't like his tone. I've known Phil since I was a little girl. You don't want to dance with me. That's right. My father suddenly appeared. Let's go, Mija. He gave Chapo a steely glare, and he backed away. Poppy paid Phil. I'll see you later, Phil, I said. Thanks for the dancing. Please come back, Margarita. I will. I enjoyed it. Poppy escorted me away from there by the arm. As we were going up the stairs, he said, let's get in my truck a minute. I want to tell you something. Before he said anything, he started the motor and moved the truck onto the highway. I stayed quiet because I knew he'd speak when he was ready. I think Chapo killed someone for money, and I don't want you around him. My heart went into my throat. You know I don't repeat gossip, he said, so I wouldn't be saying anything if I didn't think what I heard was true. What did you hear? I was going out to tell the guys I was shutting down the pool hall. My dad had his old mechanic shop set up with a pool table, and every night there would be at least a few guys hanging out. Sometimes the place was packed. They called it the pool hall. I went by the window and heard Chapo talking. So I waited there. He was falling down drunk and telling a couple of equally drunk men that he's knocked off an old gringa bitch for a large amount of money. My father rolled down the window and lit a Marlboro. You know how he is, mija. I went in and challenged him on it. I said, you didn't do any such thing. You'd never do something like that. He went ballistic. Then he called me a fucker in English and said if I didn't believe it, I could ask Ramon Rodriguez, his cousin. I don't know what to think, mija, but you should be careful. Don't go around these men. And you have to go, if you have to go, take Barney. Don't go alone. Do you think he's just bragging? Would he have actually done it? He's done a lot of, he has a lot of sudden cash. You pointed that out. I still need proof. We'll think about it. I'm sure you'll think of some way to get it. I'm new at this stuff, Poppy. You're smart, and you could do anything in the world if you put your mind to, to it. Spoken like a true father. Want to come into my house? I'll make us some enchiladas. I smiled at him. When have you ever known me to turn down your enchiladas? Don't start now, he said. Later, I sat on my porch without anything bloody in my lap. I thought of Chapo and wondered how to trap him and who had paid him and why. Mostly, I stared at Cimarron's dark outline against the star-studded sky. I thought about my father, the one who had always been there for me, and how he was as dependable and strong and every bit as beautiful as my mountain.